OutFront next, breaking news. The White House calling out Syria for using deadly barrel bombs, something the Assad regime does daily. Is it a new red line? Plus a massive U.S. warship headed toward the Korean peninsula tonight. Will it stop or encourage Kim Jong-un? And a massive manhunt tonight for a heavily armed man who mailed Trump an anti-government manifesto. Let's go out front. Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. The White House saying the U.S. is prepared to take more military action against Syria, not only if Syria uses chemical weapons, now citing Bashar al-Assad's use of barrel bombs against civilians as another trigger for retaliation. The White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, made that threat not once, but twice.
That if you gas a baby, if you put a barrel bomb in to innocent people, I think you will see a response from this president. That is unacceptable. The sight of people being gassed and blown away by barrel bombs ensures that if we see this kind of action again, we hold open the possibility of future action.
Let's be clear, barrel bombs are evil weapons. They're like IEDs dropped from the sky, literally made from a barrel. Frequently, that is an oil drum that is then filled with explosives and shrapnel, things like nails and small metal parts. Sometimes they're even filled with chemical weapons like chlorine and then dropped from the sky. The Syrian Network for Human Rights reports that Bashar al-Assad helicopters dropped 13,000 barrel bombs in 2016. So that is an average of dozens a day. Obviously, if a barrel bomb is now cause for U.S. military intervention, this game has entirely changed. Even if Sean Spicer only meant barrel bombs carrying chemical weapons, by the way, Assad launched 8 such barrel bomb attacks, dropping chlorine in just 30 days at the end of last year alone, according to Human Rights Watch. Again, a complete game changer. Perhaps this is why immediately after Spicer's comments, multiple administration officials raced to clarify them. They say there is no change in Syria policy, but they didn't say that he didn't mean what he said about barrel bombs. The confusion comes as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson heads for Moscow for one of the most tense and high-stakes meetings in decades. The Russian President Vladimir Putin, who once awarded Tillerson one of Russia's highest honors, says he's not even going to meet with the U.S. Secretary of State. Sarah Murray begins our coverage out front at the White House. And Sarah, it does seem like there is confusion at the White House.
That's right. It was a little bit of a perplexing day to see exactly what the administration's policy is going forward when it comes to Syria, which, of course, has been the big question in the wake of President Trump's decision to order those military strikes last week. Now, Sean Spicer did say multiple times that barrel bombs could be another red line for additional action on the behalf of this administration. But then they walked it back. They said there is no change in policy. Now, obviously, if they had come out and said, look, if there is a barrel bomb, we are going to respond, that would be a big change in policy, as you were pointing out. They're saying that's not exactly what Sean Spicer meant, but they're not saying what he did mean. I think, Erin, what you are seeing is this is an administration that's still very loath to draw clear red lines. They don't want to find themselves in the same place the Obama administration did, where they drew a clear, bright red line on Syria, and then when challenged, didn't respond. President Trump has made it clear that he wants to be unpredictable. He doesn't want to forecast any potential military intervention ahead of time. And I think we're seeing sort of the byproduct of that policy. And on a day like this, that leads to a lot of confusion.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. And the White House offering very different views on its policy towards Syria. Sarah's pointing out more contradictions, though, coming just days after that base was hit. Jim Sciutto is out front.
Tonight, Syrian warplanes taking off from the same airbase hit by a U.S. missile strike Friday. The White House says it has not ruled out further military action there, but it is sending mixed, even contradictory messages on the administration's goals in Syria. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, said regime change is inevitable, following last week's chemical weapons attack, which sparked the U.S. military action.
Regime change is something that we think is going to happen because all of the parties are going to see that Assad's not the leader that needs to be taking place for Syria.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, however, appeared to say the opposite, placing his faith in a political process inside Syria over any outside action.
I think our strategy in Syria, as you know, our priority is first the defeat of ISIS. And it is through that political process that we believe the Syrian people will ultimately be able to decide the fate of Bashar al-Assad.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer seemed to acknowledge both endgames.
I can't imagine a stable and peaceful Syria where Bashar al-Assad is in power. I think we all recognize that that happens, and there can be a multi-pronged approach where you're ensuring that ISIS is contained and there's a de-escalation of the proliferation of chemical weapons, at the same time creating the environment for a change in leadership.
Tillerson and other U.S. officials have been unanimous in blaming Russia for sharing responsibility for the chemical attack. A message State Department officials say Tillerson will bring to Moscow.
The recent terrible chemical weapons attack, in large measure, is a failure on Russia's part to achieve its commitment to the international community.
Russia dismisses the accusation, accusing the U.S. instead of, quote, an act of aggression. Tonight, U.S. warplanes continue to fly over Syria, targeting ISIS forces, even as the Syrian regime has increased its air defenses in the western part of the country.
Perhaps sensitive to public questions about how long-lasting the effects are of that U.S. missile strike on Friday, the Defense Secretary James Mattis released a statement today cataloging the damage in the view of the Pentagon, among other things saying that Syrian planes will no longer be able to refuel from that base, to rearm from that base, and also presenting this figure, Erin, that 20% of the Syrian Air Force is no longer operational, though our Pentagon team has done some digging on that. They can't quite pinpoint exactly where that figure comes from and if those planes were taken out in that particular strike. But there's clearly sensitivity there, and you might have noticed the president was tweeting about this himself over the weekend.
Yes. All right. We're going to get a little bit more on that now. Jim, thank you. Out front now, former Governor Bill Richardson, also former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and Energy Secretary. Corey Schock, former Director of Defense Strategy with the National Security Council under President George W. Bush. David Gergen, former presidential advisor to 4 presidents. And former Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton, also former member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Thanks to all. So, Corey, let me start with you. This whole issue of what Sean Spicer said today. If the U.S. red line is to act if Bashar al-Assad uses barrel bombs, that's a game changer. Assad used 13,000 of them last year alone. If it's just chemical-carrying barrel bombs, he used at least 8 in just 30 days at the end of last year, according to Human Rights Watch. Either way, this is a game changer, right?
Well, I think if we were going to prevent any use of barrel bombs by the Assad government, it would be a dramatic expansion of American involvement. But my understanding is that what the press secretary was trying to say was that any use of chemical weapons, whether chlorine gas, which, as you said, Assad has delivered by barrel bombs, or the sarin gas used last week, that they are, I think, trying to draw a clear red line to say that any chemical weapons use will be penalized with destruction of the forces that delivered the weapon and the surrounding air bases and infrastructure.
Colonel, though, let's just say that he means chemical-carrying barrel bombs. According to Human Rights Watch, that was done 8 times in 1 month at the end of last year.
Right.
That is still a game changer. That is not just one strike now and then we go away.
Oh, no.
That is then war. I mean, what other word would there be for that?
Absolutely. And you know, Erin, what that really means is that would mean that we go to war tomorrow. And that's the difference. You know, right now we are kind of in a holding pattern. But if we actually do what the press secretary said and follow him word for word, literally, then we would have to be prepared to go to war tomorrow. And I don't think we're ready to do that.
David, let me just play again what Sean Spicer said, because he had 2 times to say it. He was very clear. Here he is.
That if you gas a baby, if you put a barrel bomb in to innocent people, I think you will see a response from this president. That is unacceptable. The sight of people being gassed and blown away by barrel bombs ensures that if we see this kind of action again, we hold open the possibility of future action.
I think what we have here is a failure of communications by the White House. You know, in years past, the mornings have been consumed by somebody on the National Security Council staff coming up with a set of talking points on all the major issues of the day, going to the national security policy people, getting them cleared, and then sharing them with the Defense Department, the State Department, and other agencies. And then if there are any differences, working them out. It takes a long time, but you know why you do it? You do it so you can avoid the kind of confusion that we have here, which is not helpful to American foreign policy.
And as Colonel said, would mean we are going to war tomorrow. I mean, Secretary, there's also this claim you heard Jim Sciutto say that the Defense Department is saying that they wiped out 20% of the Syrian Air Force in this strike. But we've been unable to run that down. They're not providing any evidence or giving any sort of a press briefing to explain what they mean. I mean, do you think that that's possible? I mean, obviously they didn't destroy the runways and planes were taking off hours later in strikes, but that doesn't mean it's not true that they destroyed 20%. Do you think it's possible that that's a real number?
I do think it's possible, and I trust General Mattis. I think he is one of the stronger members of the National Security Cabinet. But I think the big problem here is that what we have is policy change, but nobody is connecting with each other. The Secretary of State should be making statements like this, not the UN ambassador, not the press secretary doing the red lines. The red lines are done by presidents. President Obama did that. Now this has to be President Trump. I think he has to clarify the policy, talk about an end game, but I will say something. I think the policy is moving in the right direction, but they've got to fine-tune it. They've got to have a final strategy, and the president has to back up his cabinet. The president should be clear about the policy towards Syria, to Russia. He should make either an address to the country or a public statement about what he thinks. That's what everybody is wondering.
It certainly hasn't happened yet. I mean, Corey, we've been getting instead conflicting statements from Nikki Haley, from Rex Tillerson, from Sean Spicer. And when it comes to this crucial issue of whether the Russians knew, which, by the way, if they did, is another game changer, because then you have Russia involved in a chemical weapons attack. The Secretary of State was asked specifically whether the Russians knew about the chemical attack. By the way, given that there were Russians on the very base where this attack was launched from, he answered the question pretty definitively. Here he is.
Well, to our knowledge, we do not have any information that suggests that Russia was part of the military attack undertaken using the chemical weapons.
Do you think that's possible, Corey?
Well, it does sound pretty unlikely. Moreover, the National Security Advisor said 2 days ago that it would be hard to imagine that the Russians operating on the same base did not know what was happening and weren't involved in it. So I think it's just one more example of the way the administration hasn't gotten its story straight.
Yet another contradiction. And David, it comes as Rex Tillerson is heading to Moscow. He's going to be there just hours from now. Sure. This is a guy who got one of the top honors, was with Vladimir Putin when he gave that, even if it was symbolic. They were side by side when he awarded him this medal. But now we hear Putin's refusing to meet with him. This could be the most important diplomatic meeting in decades between the U.S. and Russia. How significant is that? Putin won't partake.
I think Putin will be sending a very clear message if he does not participate. I would assume they'll make that call on the Russian front a few hours into the meeting, see how it's going, and then figure out whether they want to bring him in or not. And they'll take advantage of it. They will try to play Tillerson. There is no question about it. They will try to take advantage of him. Here the Russians have promised us all these years that the Syrians don't have any more chemical weapons. They signed up a treaty. You know, we're going to get rid of these chemical weapons.
And yet here they are launching from a base where there are Russians. It defies reason.
Well, that's right. It puts one thing though, it does give Tillerson some really strong arguments to make against him. But the one thing this has done is it's demolishing the story that Trump is a puppet of Putin's. I mean, from a political standpoint, what we've been talking about for months about the Russian connection, this has been helpful. So you wonder about, is there a bigger thing going on behind the scenes here? Is there a bigger story that we don't even get?
All right. Thanks very much to all. Of course, staying with me next, one of America's largest warships, more than 60 fighter jets on this ship alone, right now headed towards Kim Jong-un, days after the missile strike on Syria. We are live in Pyongyang. Plus, a paying customer dragged off a United flight to make room for a United employee, dragged essentially away from his wife. The man who was sitting right there who witnessed this, our guest. And Ginny Mose on Bill Clinton sharing old times and I hope not old socks with 41. Do you think Clinton gave Bush a pair of these? Breaking news, the White House is sending North Korea a major warning tonight. The U.S. military deploying the nuclear-powered USS Carl Vinson to the region. It's one of America's biggest warships, dozens and dozens and dozens of aircraft. And we're going to show you all of that in just one moment. First, though, the big question. Will this stop or challenge Kim Jong-un to launch another missile? Will Ripley is the only American journalist on the ground inside North Korea tonight, and he's out front.
Facing mounting global pressure to stop testing nuclear weapons, many fear North Korean leader Kim Jong-un might accelerate his weapon program, and they're waiting for his next move. On Saturday, North Korea celebrates the Day of the Sun, their most important holiday of the year, honoring the birth of the nation's founding father, Kim Il-sung. 5 years ago, North Korea tried to launch a satellite just 2 days before the Day of the Sun. The first attempt failed, followed by a successful launch later that year. Now, North Korea may be ready for another dramatic show of force. After a series of missile launches, U.S. and South Korean intelligence officials believe North Korea is ready to conduct a nuclear test at any time. In response to recent provocations, the U.S. is rerouting the carrier strike group Carl Vinson to the Korean Peninsula, just days after President Trump's missile strike on Syria. Some view the strike as a warning to North Korea. The U.S. is willing to respond with force if provoked. The situation is so tense. We're at the brink of war, says this Pyongyang resident. But if that happens, we'll all go to the front lines to fight the Americans. President Trump may be trying to put pressure on North Korea to stop developing nuclear weapons. But here in Pyongyang, that pressure seems to be having the opposite effect. One North Korean government official tells CNN the aggressive acts of war on the part of the United States are getting increasingly reckless. In response, we will continue to strengthen our self-defense capability. North Korea is working to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile that can deliver a nuclear warhead to the mainland U.S. Most analysts say they don't have one yet, but it's only a matter of time. We think we're very capable of defending ourselves, this Pyongyang resident says, because we have the strong leadership of Marshal Kim Jong-un. The mood inside North Korea is not tense, but festive on their biggest holiday week of the year. Tens of thousands are visiting national landmarks, like the birthplace of late President Kim Il-sung. The two late leaders. For the first time, CNN cameras are allowed inside the Museum of the Korean Revolution. More than 120 rooms, chronicling all 3 generations of Kim family leadership. This rare inside look at North Korean history shows the entire nation is built around these 3 men. I'm shown footage from 2011, when North Koreans learned of the unexpected death of the nation's second leader, Kim Jong-il. The footage brings our guide to tears. Now, their supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, is leading her and 25 million North Koreans, like his grandfather and father before him. He has absolute power over the lives of his people. And we may hear from Kim Jong-un or some other North Korean senior leaders in a matter of hours at the Supreme People's Assembly, a major political gathering kicking off here in Pyongyang. There are hundreds of delegates, and one of the things they are likely going to be discussing is North Korea's nuclear program. There's been a lot of speculation that there could be some sort of a missile test or even North Korea's 6th nuclear test sometime this week ahead of their major national holiday, the Day of the Sun. And of course, North Korean officials are telling us that they are watching very closely the movements of the Carl Vinson carrier strike group. It's interesting, Erin, because North Korea hides so much news and information about the outside world from the people who live in this country, but on the streets of Pyongyang, they know everything about the Carl Vinson. They know about the Syrian crisis. They know about the missile strike ordered by President Trump, because these activities by the United States fit the North Korean government's narrative that they've been telling people for years, that this country is under the imminent threat of invasion with missiles raining down from the U.S. And government officials here are telling us that the actions of the Trump administration just re-emphasize that point, and it allows them to tell people that they are justified in trying to build a nuclear weapon, an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead capable of reaching the mainland U.S. They could be less than 2 years away from having that kind of weapon. Erin? All
right. Well, thank you very much. A fantastic report, as we said, on the ground in Pyongyang. I want to bring back my panel. And Colonel, let me just start off with the ship. As you know, it's fascinating what he's saying, that everybody in Pyongyang that he's talking to knows about this ship. So let's just look at it. This is the USS Carl Vinson, okay, which is right now sailing up near the Korean Peninsula. Here is, this is a massive, massive beast. Tell me about it.
Well, actually, this is one of the big power projection platforms that the United States has. And as you see here, 6,000 plus crew. The entire carrier's battle group is going to have over 7,500 people. Aircraft, over 60 aircraft. Some carrier battle groups have over 70 aircraft. But generally, you've got a combination of fighter aircraft, usually FA-18s, which have an air-to-ground strike capability as well as an air-to-air strike capability. And then they also have electronic warfare aircraft and logistics aircraft as well.
So all of that on this one ship, and then that isn't even the arsenal, right? This is the arsenal. Put it into English, what is the ship capable of doing?
So this ship is capable of not only defending itself, but also it's capable of going after all of the different threats that we perceive are going to be coming against it. So if the North Koreans, for example, would run an anti-ship missile against the Carl Vinson or any of the members of the carrier battle group, we would see the Phalanx being deployed. You would also, if they were aircraft, you would see the NATO Sea Sparrow anti-missile system being deployed. And then when you have missiles that are being shot at the aircraft carrier as well as the other members of the carrier battle group, you'd have the RAM being used to fight those missiles.
So Secretary, you have been to North Korea 9 times. You know it better than anyone else on the ground. Will Kim Jong-un be deterred by this show of force, or will it actually motivate him even more for that nuclear-armed ICBM?
Well, he's so unpredictable. The answer is we don't know, but we should be very, very cautious. I support the Carl Vinson taking these steps as a show of force. I think what we need to watch is the possibility of a miscalculation. We've got 28,000 American troops in South Korea, 50,000 American troops in Japan, 25 million people in Seoul. We want to avoid a tinderbox conflagration. And what Kim Jong-un wants, I believe right now, he wants some kind of a provocation. He wants to show for internal reasons that he's strong. He wants to continue his nuclear effort. I think what we need to watch is what happened in Florida. President and the Chinese possibly agreeing on a strategy. I have no reason to believe that something very strong has come out, but possibly for the first time an effort by China and South Korea announcing today increased sanctions. But what we don't know is South Korea and China combined, especially China that controls food, fuel assistance, all kinds of support for North Korea, will really lean on Kim Jong-un to cool it. And possibly the next step is a diplomatic effort, and I believe that it's going to be the U.S. and North Korea in some kind of bilateral deal if tensions are going to be diffused.
So you know, we have this missile defense. Obviously, this here is a map of the Korean Peninsula. The defense system here is called THAAD. It's the U.S. missile defense system. We can just show you a little bit, sorry, of how it actually works. That is the missile defense system that is there. Now, the point I want to make here, Secretary, is actually Donald Trump said recently in that interview with the Financial Times, if China is not going to solve North Korea, we will. That's all I'm telling you. If the U.S. were to strike North Korea's no nuclear site, Secretary, to try to do this preemptive strike that people throw out there as an idea, could it all be done in one fell swoop, or would you definitionally have a strike back from North Korea first, in which millions could perhaps die?
Yeah, North Korea would strike back. I think eventually we would defeat North Korea massively. But there would be the possibility of the 25 million people in Seoul being affected, American troops, a tripwire effect. You want to avoid that, but at the same time, I think we have to protect our interest in the peninsula. And we have to first, I believe, use diplomacy. And remember, too, there's a young American there named Otto Warmbier, who is detained by the North Koreans. Let's not forget getting him out. I've been trying, many others have too. But I think we got to be extremely careful. Let China show what they're ready to do first before some kind of military strike.
Because, Colonel, this THAAD and missile defense system that we were just showing, it is unproven, right? Because it hasn't actually had to work in a real life scenario.
That's true. Many of these systems that are being deployed have either seen service in Iraq or Afghanistan. This is one that has not. And as a high-altitude air defense system, it is designed to go after exactly what it says, high-altitude missile threats. these missile threats are going to be the ones that could most affect areas like Seoul, population centers, and it could also potentially even be used against longer-range missiles.
All right. Thank you very much, Secretary. Thank you. And next, the race everyone is talking about is a Democrat about to win a seat in deep red Georgia, held by Republicans for decades. And United Airlines, a paying passenger, dragged off a plane so one of their employees could take his seat. We're going to talk to a man on board who watched this. Tonight, angry voters filling a town hall for Republican Congressman Ted Yoho in Florida after a man was punched at one of Yoho's last town halls. Some voters frustrated at Republicans for supporting President Trump's agenda. Nick Valencia is out front in Gainesville at that town hall. And Nick, it has obviously started there. What's happening?
Yeah, Erin, this just got underway. So far, the environment here is a very civil one, but it just got underway. People waited for hours outside to make sure that they got a seat inside here. This capacity crowd, about 600 people. Last time around, when he hosted a town hall here, Representative Ted Yoho, that is, in Gainesville, it was not as smooth. Inside that town hall, he got an earful from his constituents. Many people upset about the repeal of Affordable Care Act or the potential for that. They're also upset about potential involvement or alleged involvement of Russia into the election that may have influenced it towards President Trump. I spoke to Joy Pitts here. She's a chapter president for Indivisible. And interestingly enough, Erin, she is one of the people that helped organize this event. The congressman office made it very clear that they were involved with Indivisible here in trying to get this event organized. Many people here upset. They plan on voicing their displeasure, and they waited a long time to make sure that they got inside. Erin?
All right, Nick, thank you very much. And tonight, all eyes are on a crucial special election in Georgia. Democrats seizing on the protests against President Trump, hoping that a first-time candidate can win a seat that Republicans held for nearly 40 years. Jason Carroll is out front.
I'm proud of the momentum that we've been able to build.
Hi.
Hey, John.
Hey, Jen.
Meet Democrat Jon Ossoff. At 30 years old, the former congressional aide and documentary filmmaker has never held public office, but he has become the candidate to beat.
This thing has taken on a little bit of a life of its own, and people are watching across the country because it is the first competitive contest of this new era.
Hey, y'all.
Traditionally, voters here in the 6th District, which includes part of Atlanta and the city's affluent northern suburbs, have sent to Congress the likes of Newt Gingrich and most recently Tom Price, who is now Health and Human Services Secretary. It was thought that one of the 11 Republicans running in the special election would claim the seat, until Ossoff turned the race into a referendum on President Trump.
I want to go to Washington and hold people accountable, and that includes the President of the United States.
Trump carried the district by a little more than a point last November. In 2012, Mitt Romney swept it by more than 20 points.
I think spring has sprung.
Ossoff, hoping to tap into angst among Democrats over Trump, has been running ads critical of the president.
But we can't let Donald Trump put us at risk.
How effective do you think that has been for you so far?
There are clearly people who have serious concerns about the president's approach to governance.
Nice to see you.
GOP candidate Bob Gray isn't afraid to embrace the president, hiring several of Trump's former state operatives to help his campaign.
It's pretty clear that this is a district that's getting behind our president.
While former Georgia Secretary of State Karen Handel and former State Senator Dan Moody question if the district is truly on the verge of turning blue.
They're dreaming about this, but the Republicans are going to hold on to this seat.
The Republicans will ultimately select a candidate that can beat the Democrat.
Claire Wise has not decided on a candidate, but
it will be a Republican candidate. I think Jon Ossoff is too liberal.
We are so excited you're here.
Cheryl Sykes, also a registered Republican, disagrees. She's backing Ossoff.
I think he is dedicated, and I really feel like we need more balance and more middle-of-the-road people in Washington.
And Dave Ferguson, a self-described independent, summed up his reasoning for supporting Ossoff.
Trump.
Ossoff has raised more than $8 million and has $2 million in the bank. His momentum not lost on Republicans who've added staff and ratcheted up their attacks.
Ossoff wasn't exactly fighting against terrorism. He was fighting against restrictions on cake parties.
Come on, ready?
Ossoff's goal for the April 18th primary is to get more than 50% of the vote to avoid a June runoff.
Do you feel any sort of sense of extra pressure?
Yeah, I do feel it.
Yeah.
you know, I'm human too. And there's a lot of eyes on the race. There's a lot of people I want to make proud.
Jason Carroll, CNN, Roswell, Georgia.
And out front now, CNN politics editor-at-large Chris Cillizza. And Chris, you know, Ossoff has raised more than $8 million. You just heard in the report. That's more than Tom Price raised in his last 3 elections combined, right? Republicans have noticed this. The RNC had an attack email today saying, look at Ossoff. He doesn't even live in the district, right? They are firing back. How seriously are Republicans taking this race?
Well, I think more and more seriously, Erin, because it is a district, Jason mentioned in the piece, it's a district that Donald Trump only won by 1 point. And the reason for that is not because it's not a Republican district. It is. It's because it's not a Donald Trump Republican district. It's affluent. It's near a big city. You know, it's a suburban, close-in suburban district. Donald Trump ran above people like Mitt Romney in 2016 in more rural areas that are also Republican. He struggled in suburban areas like this. So you're going to have to get a bunch of crossover Republicans to vote for Ossoff for him to have any chance. And he rightly points out in there, the real chance here is next Tuesday's primary. Ton of Republican candidates splitting the vote. He's the only serious Democratic candidate in the race. Yeah. If he doesn't get 50, now it's a one-on-one race in a Republican district in June. Much tougher.
But the thing is here, you know, Democrats obviously have a lot of momentum to be able to be in this situation, right? There's 5 special House elections. Yep. And the reason, just so people watching understand, 4 of them are Republicans who are now in the Trump administration, right? Which is obviously why those seats were vacated. We have Mike Pompeo's seat in Kansas among them. You just heard a voter there, Chris, though, say one word for why he's going to vote Trump, right? Yep. That is what this is all about.
Yeah, no question. And Ossoff has made it a referendum on Trump, as has the Democratic candidate in Kansas, the race tomorrow night. You've seen bigwigs from the Republican Party. Trump has now recorded a robocall in Kansas for Mr. Estes, the state treasurer, who's the Republican nominee. Mike Pence recorded a robocall. Ted Cruz was in the state today. These are not things that happen by accident, Erin. They're concerned about these districts because it's the first elections in the Trump era. And when you have a president who's anywhere between 35% of approval and maybe 43% approval, nationally, you need to be concerned.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. And next, out front, a massive manhunt tonight, a desperate search for a man armed with high-powered weapons who sent a threatening manifesto to President Trump. And shocking video. Why did United Airlines call police to drag a paying customer off an overbooked flight? Really, you can't make this story up. It is so awful what United did. A passenger sitting in the middle of it all joins us next. Breaking news, a massive manhunt this hour for a man who sent an anti-government manifesto to President Trump on the same day he allegedly stole an arsenal from a gun store. Joseph Jakubowski is believed to be armed and dangerous with more than a dozen high-end rifles and handguns from the Armageddon gun shop in Janesville, Wisconsin. About 30 minutes after the burglary, police found Jakubowski's car on fire, they believe intentionally. Authorities also say Jakubowski sent a 161-page manifesto to the president. In a moment, he captured on video.
To anybody that got this letter, you might want to read it. There it is. You see, it's getting revolution. It's time for change.
Officials say they spoke to an associate of Jakubowski's who said he had been threatening to steal guns and use them in an attack, that he had made threats towards schools. Out front now, Sheriff Robert Spoden, one of the people leading the manhunt. And Sheriff, I appreciate your time tonight. He sent that manifesto, 161 pages, to President Trump. His car, we know you have found on fire, right? I mean, do you have any idea how he's getting around or where he could be?
No, we don't, and that's where we need our citizens to be the eyes and ears of law enforcement. And that's not just only for citizens that are here in Wisconsin. That's across the nation, because he could be in Washington, D.C., he could be in California. I mean, it depends on wherever he believes the next step in his plan is.
What sort of places are you concerned he could target?
Well, obviously, when you read the document that he sent to the White House, he has a strong dislike or hatred towards government officials, both local and federal and state level. So we're concerned that, you know, if his end game is to inflict casualties, then he may go someplace where there are going to be a large number of people. So we have tried to increase our security at areas such as the courthouse, you know, school events, things such as a lot of damage.
He has obviously this arsenal of guns, bulletproof vest, a helmet. How dangerous is he?
Well, when you look at the document that he wrote and sent, it's very lengthy, it's very detailed. It's one that obviously he has put a lot of thought and effort into. And in it, he talks a great deal about revolution. He talks a great deal about change. And even in the video where he actually films himself doing that, or mailing the document to the president, he again brings up revolution. He obviously has thought about this for some time. He went and stole these 18 guns, including long rifles and handguns. He then goes and burns his car in a desolate area and basically goes under the radar. And so what we're concerned about is that this could be just another step in his plan. When he talks about revolution, he's talking about having the people rise up. And so I believe he's looking for some event or something he can do to promote his cause. And that's what really scares us back here.
And also when you talk about involving others, I mean, you know, we see the video of him mailing the manifesto and we just heard him speak. It's clear it seems someone else was videotaping him, right? Someone else knew he was doing this or was a part of it. We're looking at him here. Do you have any idea who that is or not?
Yes, we do. We actually have identified that individual. He is a male, and we're not certain if he even understood the seriousness of that document. We've interviewed him. He has cooperated with investigators, and we continue to hold him as a person of interest. He's not in custody, and he has cooperated with us.
All right, Sheriff Spoden, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And next, outrage over this. A paying customer violently dragged by police off a United Airlines flight in order to accommodate crew that needed to travel to their next flight. The person sitting right in front of him, my guest, next. And breaking news tonight, the federal government reviewing the incident of a man forcibly dragged off an airplane. It's a disturbing moment, and it came after United Airlines asked some people to get off a flight to accommodate traveling crew. They offered money. People didn't want to take it. So then they said, well, we're going to pick you randomly. And the man they picked declined. And then this happened.
Hey, come on. Come on. There you go.
Oh, this is
busted his lip.
Oh my God! Look at what you did to him! Oh my God!
That Chicago aviation security officer put on leave tonight. Again, the story here is United Airlines asked for volunteers, really because they needed to get a flight crew on to get to another airport on time. Nobody that was paying for their seat wanted to get off. So the airline said, tough, we'll pick randomly and you better get off. United CEO apologized today for, quote, having to reaccommodate these customers, saying the airline is doing a detailed review, but doubling down on their side of this, as you'll hear in a moment. Joining me now, John Clausen, the man in the orange shirt, sitting right in front of the man who was dragged off. We're just trying to get that shot back. We lost it for 1 second. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to break. We'll get him back on the other side of it. His tale is worth hearing. Trust me, plus Jeannie Mose on the sock story. We'll be right back. Joining me now, John Clausen. He's the man in the orange shirt who was sitting in front of the man who was dragged off that United flight today. And John, thank you for being with me. I mean, it had to have been just stunning to see this. I mean, there you are. This is another video from a passenger. This is the aviation security officer literally pulling that man out of his seat forcibly. You see him hit his head on an armrest. It looks like there's blood there. Could you see if he was hurt?
Mm-hmm. No, he was bleeding from the mouth. Yeah, he was visibly hurt as they drug him off the plane.
I mean, we also, you know, saw him at one point saying, I just want to go home, I just want to go home. I mean, you actually spoke to him. It wasn't just that he was sitting behind you. You'd had a conversation with him before this video. I understand that you said he was traveling with his wife. What did he tell you?
Well, when the United personnel came on and told him he would have to leave the airplane, we had talked. He was sitting just right behind me. He was sitting with one of my students. We'd just gotten back from Greece where we'd been working with refugees. And yeah, we spoke at that point, and I suggested he call his lawyer, which I believe he did. His wife was actually sitting about 3 rows behind him on the other side of the airplane. They weren't together. And yeah, he was very pleasant, very sweet man.
And I mean, obviously, airlines, the whole story is sort of stunning to believe, frankly, John. But obviously, they're not supposed to separate people who are traveling with others. He was traveling with his wife.
Right.
The airline has just released an email that they sent actually to their employees today, and in it, the CEO of United tells the United employees that the passenger was disruptive and belligerent. You were there, was he?
Well, when the United employee came on the flight, after telling us that we were all stuck on the tarmac, we would not be allowed to leave until we made room for their personnel, she increased the amount of money that they were offering to $800. Of course, they're not real dollars, they're United dollars for flights. And no one took it because we were all a little upset, to be honest, that we were going to have to sit and wait until 4 people volunteered. And then she said that rather than negotiate up a higher price or try and get other people to volunteer, she said, well, we'll choose 4 people to get off the flight. And yeah, that's a pretty traumatic experience.
Well, I mean, absolutely.
He was fine. He was like the rest of us, a little stunned that they would even suggest such a thing, and not disruptive at all. When she came on and said he had to leave, he said, look, I'm a doctor, I have patients tomorrow, I need to get back to Louisville, I'm not getting off the flight.
And that's when it escalated. I mean, it does seem like he got incredibly upset, and I think anybody watching could understand why. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
How shocked were you at how violent this became?
Well, I couldn't believe it. I understand that United could ask us to leave. What I was shocked by was that they weren't willing to raise the price, and I mean, these are just United airline dollars. It wasn't really costing them anything at all, and they would have easily had more volunteers if they had just done that. None of us could believe that it would get to that point of violence. When the police came on, they were just determined to take him off the plane. There was no negotiating. Yeah. There was nothing. It was just, you're off the plane.
It's impossible to believe, really. John, let me just ask you this question. Will you fly United again?
I've been asked that several times. I don't know. I would prefer probably to fly a different airline at that point. I mean, it's kind of scary. You're sitting on that plane, and in come these 3 police officers, and they pull you off a flight that you purchased a ticket for. It's kind of hard to understand that.
All right, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And welcome home.
Thank you. Thanks.
And now on a lighter note, time for Jeannie Mose and the socks appeal of 2 American presidents.
So what does a former president get another former president who probably has everything? Socks, and not just any socks, green ones with chocolate Labradors.
I like a colorful sock. I'm a sock man.
A sock man spotted sporting everything from pink socks to lobster socks. No wonder Bill Clinton is socking it to him. The 2 became close while traveling together to disasters like the tsunami in South Asia.
I love George Bush.
I just enjoy being with the guy.
I love you. And Clinton knows Bush loves socks, like these cactus ones. His collection has inspired headlines like All the President's Socks. If you think Superman is for kids, check out Bush's Superman socks worn on his 89th birthday. His Presidential Library Foundation asked folks to send in their own flamboyant sock photos in honor of his birthday. Read my lips, no boring socks, tweeted one guy. If you donate to the GOP, you can get an autograph there.
Gear up for fall with your very own pair of George H.W. Bush socks.
George W. Bush is more conservative with his Crocs and socks bearing the presidential seal. His dad sure knows how to charm the ladies. He donned a red, white, and blue pair to cheer on the Houston Texans cheerleading squad.
We love your socks, too. Yeah.
I'm surprised you noticed it.
And though he's known for being humble, his selfie socks were a minor sensation. Given to him by a fan, they ended up being auctioned off for charity for $535. But those Bush selfie socks don't quite have the flair of the Trump hair socks. Selling for $35.69 at Walmart, but be prepared to not.
And thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can watch OutFront anytime, anywhere. You just go to CNN Go. In the meantime, we'll pass it off to AC360 with Anderson Cooper. It starts right now.